Good evening and thanks for staying up late with us as we dive into all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj, and about face by President Donald Trump on an order that caused mass confusion. We're diving into that in just a moment here. Plus, the birthright citizenship battle. The president wants to upend it as he drops the hammer on immigration, but we know changing the Constitution isn't as simple as the president signing an executive order. An Oakland University legal and ethical studies professor is going to be weighing in with us right here in Studio C. And TikTok for sale, and an American company you know well is interested in the site. At least that's according to the president. We're diving into that. Plus, now that the Meta has dropped some of the fact-checking features off its sites, how do you spot fake news? Social media expert Ethan Lloyd is with us in studio in about 20 minutes. But we begin with this. The White House Budget Office rescinding an order freezing federal grants and loans, an order which caused panic about what would and what wouldn't be impacted. That's after a judge halted it just before it was supposed to take effect on Monday. Now, in the notice, the White House did say Trump's orders targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion and climate change spending are still in place. Those are still targeted. But this move was seen by many as the way the president was basically testing his limits of power. Now, I want to take you back to high school government class just for a moment to build context about what we're seeing and what's possible. Presidents can't just govern unilaterally. Now, there are three separate but equal branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. You remember this? You always hear the phrase, Congress controls the purse strings. And that's what's important to keep in mind with this particular order. You see, the Constitution grants Congress the power to figure out how much money is spent and requires the executive branch to pay it out. And a law known as the Impoundment Control Act actually bans the president from stopping payments on those grants or other programs approved by Congress. Now, we were able to get some perspective on this issue from a man you know well from The Pulse and from this community, Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio.
Presidents do have some, and it's always the question is, you know, how far and where is the line, right? But presidents have some flexibility in how appropriated monies are spent. I think Trump is doing as president exactly what he said he was going to do when he was running.
The White House said pulling the order effectively ends the court case surrounding it and allows the government to focus on orders designed to control federal spending. But that's not all that's happened involving the Trump administration today. A busy day. So as we've been doing, let's roll through some of the big stories in day 9 of the Trump administration, starting with the first bill President Trump signed into law, the Laken Riley Act. It's named after a Georgia nursing student who was murdered by an undocumented immigrant. Now, the bill requires federal authorities to detain and deport immigrants accused of theft and violent crimes before a conviction. It also allows states to take civil action against federal workers who don't enforce immigration laws. But that's not the only news coming out of that bill. The president also says he's directing thousands of illegal migrants be sent directly to Guantanamo Bay. You'll remember that's a military base that housed detainees from the war on terror. The president says that detention center will be able to hold up to 30,000 people living here illegally who can't be deported to their home countries right away. And another layer to the Trump administration's effort to shrink the government, they announced they're offering buyouts to all federal employees who choose to leave their jobs by next week. Pretty soon. The employees who take the buyout will get roughly 8 months worth of pay. Those who end up staying will have to go through what the administration calls enhanced standards of suitability and conduct. And the memo also warned of future downsizing. And finally to this, the president is expected to sign an executive order promising to revoke visas and deport college students who aren't citizens that took part in those pro-Palestinian protests. You remember those? The administration claims it's part of the fight against anti-Semitism. But civil rights groups say campus protests were mostly peaceful and, most importantly, are protected by the First Amendment. Well, turning now to the latest involving TikTok, where the president made a major announcement involving the efforts to try to save it. He told reporters Microsoft is one of the companies interested in purchasing the platform. TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, has until April 4th to sell or face a ban in the U.S. It follows a whirlwind weekend where the app briefly went dark before going back online hours later after the president pledged to give the owners more time. But all of that got us wondering, what are your thoughts on the app? Should it be saved? When we want a pulse check, there's only one guy who can get answers like nobody else can. Fox 2's Charlie Langton. Here's what some of you told him.
You think TikTok should be saved?
No.
Why not?
It's a disgrace to our country.
Tell me, TikTok, it's good, isn't it?
I'm not a fan of it personally. I mean, I've downloaded it before, but what it popped up on the feeds were kind of disturbing, so I can't imagine what it shows up for a child.
So, there are some benefits to TikTok. What are those benefits of TikTok?
I always love to look for stuff, cooking, the food, health, and everything else.
How confident are you that TikTok's going to be saved?
I'm really not too sure. I'm not too big into TikTok or anything like that.
Tell me why TikTok's a disgrace.
It's a distraction. These kids need to learn how to fend for themselves and grow up in America.
It's not happening?
No.
What do you think's going to happen with TikTok? What should happen with TikTok?
It should be deleted.
All these other apps like Vine and all these other ones have come and go. I don't think it's a big deal, but it is a trend.
We also asked you the question on our website, fox2detroit.com. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that the app will be saved? If you want to vote, just scan the QR code on your screen. So far, the average answer is about a 6. Let us know what you think. You know, it really is interesting. Kids just need their phones all the time. I mean, just leave it alone. Where's my phone, Z? Thank you. No, we'll get it later. Moving now to Capitol Hill, where it was a heated hearing in front of the Senate Finance Committee for this man, President Trump's Health and Human Services Secretary nominee, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Kennedy has shared doubts about vaccines and pushed a theory that scientists debunked, claiming they cause autism. At one point, Kennedy was grilled about past comments he made about the CDC.
Read your words. It says that the institution CDC and the vaccine program is your description of their work, is more important than the children that it's supposed to protect. And you know, it's the same reason we had a pedophile scandal in the Catholic Church. It's because people were able to convince themselves that the institution of the church was more important than these little boys and girls who were being raped. That's pretty provocative language. You said in another statement to me, this is like Nazi death camp. I mean, let me finish. I'm just reading your words. I mean, what happened to these kids? 1 in 31 boys in this country, their minds are being robbed from them.
Yeah, I was not comparing the CDC to Nazi death camps. I was comparing the injury rate to our children to other atrocities. And I wouldn't compare, of course, the CDC to Nazi death camps to the extent that any statement that I made has been interpreted that way. Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Heated moments there. And, you know, one person who's weighing in, former Vice President Mike Pence. He posted a video of several of President Trump's previous comments about RFK Jr. from 7 months ago, where he repeatedly called him a radical left Democrat, even saying he'd take former President Biden over him. That tweet called on senators to vote no, saying, quote, President Trump was right the first time. As for Kennedy, he'll be in front of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions later on this week. And here in Metro Detroit, another person has thrown his hat into the ring for Detroit mayor. We're making news in the political world right here. This man, Detroit City Council member Fred Durhal III. He's been on the council since 2021 and is a lifelong Detroiter. He's running to replace Mayor Mike Duggan, who, as you know, is running for governor in 2026. Now, Durhal joins current City Council President Mary Sheffield and former City Council President Santil Jenkins as candidates for mayor. And by the way, Durhal will join us right here on The Pulse tomorrow night, sharing his message for voters and his goals for the city. As you know, whenever someone throws their hat in the ring, this is the show to be on. He will be here tomorrow night. All right, we are diving into the birthright citizenship battle next on The Pulse. An Oakland University political science professor joins us to break down what the president can do and can't do and answers your questions. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. And welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show. This is The Pulse, and joining us now to talk about not only the birthright citizenship battle, but the president's executive orders as a whole, Oakland University professor Dr. Michael Greiner. He's an associate professor of management, specifically legal and ethical studies. We said political science in the tease there, but we're so used to talking about politics on this show. But clearly, in this world, the world of politics stretches into so many other issues, and in this case, ethical and legal issues. And so you're the perfect guy to talk to. I want to ask you right away, and you're a very objective person. You look at things as a fact-finding mission here. Yeah. This president so far tried to freeze that funding, of course. So many people were kind of like upset and trying to figure out what would be next. Take us through this process here and why you think it was so important for that. For them to kind of do an about-face?
Well, the first thing to remember is what an executive order is, you know, because I think a lot of people out there have this perception that the president has this incredible power with executive orders. You know, I've had people come up to me and say, why doesn't the president just allocate these funds with an executive order? And the reality is he can't do that. The executive order is purely a way for the president to order the administration to do something. It only affects the people who are the members of the administration. It doesn't affect people outside of the administration. It doesn't affect the general public. It's not something that's a law, and it has to be consistent with both the laws that Congress passes as well as the Constitution. So in this case, this was clearly an unconstitutional order. The Supreme Court has numerous times ruled that the president does not have the power to impound funds. You know, you talked about the Impoundment Act, but even beyond that, there was actually a Supreme Court case back in the 1990s when President Clinton was in office where the court ruled unanimously that the president does not have the power to essentially stop spending that's been allocated by Congress. And that's something that was made clear by the founders of the country. The power of the purse string stands not just with the Congress, but specifically with the House of Representatives. And that's where that stands. And the president doesn't have the power to override them.
We have some viewer questions. We'll get to them in a minute here, but I want to make it really clear as we do this show here. We're not passing judgment at all on so much of what this administration has said they wanted to rein in, which is unnecessary spending. I know there was one case in which they said there was $50 million allotted to condoms in Gaza. There was so much extraneous spending that he's trying to kind of rein in, but there's a way in which to do it, and you're saying perhaps following that rule is important. I want to take us to our first question here. Anne wrote into the Pulse asking you, Dr. Greiner, this question right here. I'm an ongoing cancer patient who relies on research. What should I expect in my future? When you talk about research funds and a freeze on those funds and what future action could happen, what would you tell her?
I think it's a scary time right now for people in a lot of areas. You know, there's talk about Medicaid being impacted. There's talk about foreign aid, you know, which we might say, oh, that's a bad thing, but we have to remember a lot of it, for example, is going to Ukraine. We have a large Ukrainian population here in Metro Detroit, and I know that they're very concerned about what's going on there.
But Social Security and Medicaid, the administration has made very clear that that's not to be
They have said that that's not to be touched, but there are so many things that the government does that affects real people. I mean, of course, we've got the Veterans Administration. That's something that could be affected by these, and a lot of the education spending that we have and public health. Those are all things that basically are funded by the federal government. So one area that is funded is certainly the research into medicines, and the fact that this is something that could be impacted by that. It's really something to be concerned about.
And there are other questions coming in right now. This one's coming from Tomika here on the Pulse. Tomika, thanks for writing in. You're asking, is there a limit to how many executive orders that Trump can sign a certain period of time? And let's be clear, all presidents sign executive orders. I know Biden, when he first got into office, was under a lot of criticism for signing 30 of them in his first week in office. But is there a limit?
There is no limit. No, there's no limit. But again, there's more of a limitation on what they can do, which is, again, specifically ordering the administration itself to do something or not to do something.
Very clear on this last question. Lucia, we thank you for writing to us, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Ms. Perry. Biden sent trillions of dollars to Ukraine. We, the people, didn't have a say, so now the shoe's on the other foot. This is different. Why?
Well, actually, the people do have a say, and the place that they have a say is when they elect their representatives to Congress. You know, it's interesting to note that the founder specifically said that the House was supposed to be the place that funding bills were supposed to originate because it was the one that was closest to the people. And interestingly enough, in the federal government, in the original formulation that they had of the federal government, that was the only one that was actually directly elected by people. For example, U.S. senators were actually originally elected by the state legislatures. So they wanted federal spending to be something that came as close to the people as possible, and that was why they had to come through the from the House of Representatives.
Not coming from a told you so energy at all, but Lucia, precisely Biden sending trillions to Ukraine is because your Congress people, your senators voted to do so, and so that's appropriated to that war. Last question about birthright citizenship. What do you think will happen moving forward? Now it's tied up with a federal judge saying, hold on.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if this is something also that they back off on, because again, it is something, as the federal judge said, that is clearly unconstitutional. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution is one of 3 amendments that were passed in the wake of the Civil War, basically to address the way that African Americans have been treated in the country. And they want to make it clear that African American citizens who are born here have a right to all the rights of citizenship. And you can't suddenly take that and say, you know, oh no, it only applies in certain cases. You know, the beauty about the law the way it currently is it's a bright line test. If you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. You never know if you, with other people, like, you know, for me personally, for example, you know, my mother is American, my father's Canadian. I was born in the United States simply because my mother was here visiting her parents and I came early.
Yeah.
You know, had it not been for the birthright citizenship rule, then who knows how that could have evolved.
You know, many of the conservative views out there will say that they're trying to crack down on people who are coming in 8 months pregnant on planes to have what they call anchor babies here in this country. But clearly, with that big swoop, you're talking about a lot of other people like yourself and perhaps someone like me who my parents came here on green cards to work. So it's an interesting time, and one that, of course, is going to require a lot of experts to sit with us and actually unpack some of this. And so, Dr. Greiner, we're glad you did that with us tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
We'll do it again. Well, a lot of us are constantly scrolling on social media. Still haven't found my phone in the studio. But let's face it, there's a lot of junk out there, a lot of fake stuff. We're helping you spot that fake news, and we're getting you the latest with TikTok. That's next with our social media expert, Ethan Lloyd. You're watching The Pulse. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to The Pulse here on Fox 2. There is so much going on in the world. And then there's the world of social media. TikTok updates, figuring out how to spot bogus information. Here to break it all down, social media guru Ethan Lloyd. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse.
Thank you for having me.
We'll begin just with what happened today in a few hours. My wife sent me this on the left. On social media, someone claiming that there was this dangerous couple on the run, and they were trying to hurt and kill people in their homes, hurting police officers. It was fake, and it literally was headlined as like Waterford News. And everybody in the Waterford and the northern Oakland County area was sharing this over and over again. And finally, my wife was like, could you just, I said, no, this did not happen. We're in a newsroom where we triple check facts. That didn't happen. On the right, did Stevie Wonder pass away? No. Stevie Wonder is getting ready for the Grammys. He is doing great. He's a Motown legend.
Absolutely.
And then other people are saying, well, who reported it? And they're just sharing false information. This is the danger of social media. There's not a lot of guardrails in place now, are there?
It is a danger. And I just want to say it is very scary to see information and to not know whether or not it's the truth or not. Ironically, if my social media detective skills are working, it looked like those were meta posts. It looked like those posts were coming from Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah,
and
good eye.
we just noticed that, or we know that Mark Zuckerberg is implementing a new form of fact-checking with community notes. We're going to have to see how that pans out. One major thing that I really encourage people to do is whenever you see information, click on that profile, check it out. You know, do a little bit of investigation when you're deciphering information, and you'll be able to tell pretty quickly whether or not it's a real page or not.
That's really smart, because it's like anything, you know, social media is wonderful to connect people, to get information, but like a car, if you don't know how to drive it, you're just recklessly driving around, you're hurting other people. And in this case, people are just sharing things that aren't true. And I don't need the TV. I don't need to watch the news. I don't need to read the real thing. I get my news from my neighbors. I love you neighbors, by the way, if you're watching, but I don't trust my neighbors with the information from the town crier. So there has to be a level of discretion, and you're saying we need to exercise patience as consumers, right? Don't just jump and share, but really think about what you're looking at.
Well, what you described, what you did, Roop, was exactly what I think Mark Zuckerberg ideally wants and what Elon Musk wants from community notes as a concept, which is people jumping in and saying, wait a minute, there's something off here. Now, the issue with that is The true issue is, originally, we knew if something was real or not because of the blue check mark by somebody's name, verification. That process was killed for profit. So what's happened is you can buy a blue check. All right, so we don't have the blue check anymore to verify information. Now it's up to us to investigate and look into it. And will we step up to the challenge? I don't know. I really hope we do.
Well, it's a matter of slowing down, though. I feel like everybody's in such a rush to share something when they don't know if it's true. And I think they assume, many of them do, that we're doing the same thing in newsrooms. And you know, as someone who's worked in the field of journalism as well, that's not how it works. You don't just hear about something and show up with a microphone and talk about it. But the problem is that you have people doing that on social, right?
Yes, you have people doing that on social media all day, every day. You know, there is so much content on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you couldn't see all of it, you know, and you know, this is something that I learned on the Senate campaign trail. There is power in our social media platforms. Somebody can make a post and have a voice, and it can be amplified by thousands and thousands of people. Whether it's true or not is up to the app developer to decipher, and that's where we saw influence from Congress, influence from the Biden administration, and concern with President Trump with his extension of the TikTok deadline. People are concerned about how we can utilize social media. It's up to the app developers to address that.
And one thing, if you really have a question about something, stick everything that you just saw into the Google bar, hit news, and see if anyone else is reporting it. If nobody is reporting upon a Motown legend or something in Waterford where there's killers on the loose, allegedly, which was fake here, you would know about that from other news organizations. So that's important. Last question, TikTok. What do you think is going to happen moving forward? Microsoft is being named by President Trump as a potential buyer. What could happen here next?
You know, I think we saw something really interesting that started maybe even sooner, but started for a lot of us at the inauguration of President Donald Trump, where we saw so many tech billionaires in the room, and we're thinking, why are they here? What are they interested in? Are they here for TikTok? We saw the CEO of TikTok was there, present in flesh. And what I think is going to happen is we are going to see a bid in true business fashion. We're going to see a bid on TikTok. You're going to hear of a lot of billionaires, a lot of tech companies. Oracle was even mentioned. If you're in corporate, you know about Oracle and their services. You're going to hear about a lot of billionaires wanting to buy that platform. It is the most effective algorithm out there. The only issue is that algorithm is owned by ByteDance. So what is going to happen with the new algorithm? Who's going to buy it? We don't know this yet, but if I had to guess, it's either going to be Elon Musk, Microsoft, Oracle, or another big tech company that purchases it.
And the algorithm, you think, then could warp and change?
It's going to be interesting because they're going to have to create a new one, because that algorithm is not going to be allowed moving forward. This is a 50% sale. This is a 50% sale, and they have 75 days to pull it off. There are a lot of question marks around this whole process, and you know, what's going to be coming from the parent company. Are they still involved? You know, they still have 50% ownership. Are they going to decide what's on the algorithm? Are they going to be in charge of fact checking? You know, these are the kind of questions that are, I'm sure, going to be brought to the negotiation table. And, you know, we'll just stay tuned and see what happens.
You'll be watching it really carefully. We know you will every step of the way. 10 seconds left. Any last minute advice? What can people do to spot fake news?
This is the biggest thing that I would say. Click on that profile and look at the comments. If the comments look like they were made by a bot, if they look generic, if you click on the comments and then you click on the profile for the comments and it's clearly a fake page, consider that. Why are there a lot of fake comments? Maybe that's somebody's will.
Take a breath and do some homework. We all have that social responsibility, don't we?
We do.
Ethan Lloyd, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse, as always.
Thank you for having me.
That is The Pulse for tonight. Extra is next. And give me your latest feedback. If you have something that you didn't like or you liked on this show, just let me know. Hit me up on my email, roop.raj@fox.com. I'm Roop Raj. Have a good night, everybody.